and transparency will make success much more likely. So on the other hand, lack of transparency leads to corruption, which undermines the leadership of our country. When politicians are bought by powerful people of business, or when leaders themselves use personal or public funds to buy support, they become representative of the few and allow vested interests to capture and destroy the development agenda, which would benefit the most of society and, in fact, of future generations. So transparency matters. To give voice to issues and concerns that are often overlooked by policy and decision makers. Citizens' engagement plays an important part in designing, in realizing, and monitoring the development agenda. In fact, across all our countries and continents, our people are asking for a new social contract between state and their citizens, between states and the market. And they want a social contract that promotes the rule of law, founded on justice and human rights, as I mentioned, people's engagement, translating growth into productive employment, policies for poverty reduction and equitable distribution of wealth, assets, and opportunities, and where there is better resource management and wise stewardship of our planet and our ecosystems. Where there is better financial governance, including at the global level. We're talking constantly at government level, but we need to look at governance and transparency and openness at the global level. Where there is investment in social protection to lift people out of poverty as well as exclusion, and to build resilience to risks and vulnerabilities from both natural disasters and financial and price volatility shocks. I think there should be accountability for the type of financial shocks that we all have been experiencing, because it hurts our real economy. In other words, public participation have a crucial role in making sure that governments and private sector at all levels act responsibly and create genuine opportunities for all, and therefore it contributes to social cohesion and acts as a bridge both economically, politically, and socially, especially bridging our divides. Though the last part is why accountability matters. Accountability is the other side of the transparency coin. Together, they are a powerful tool for preventing theft and waste of scarce natural and financial resources. We need I call it an accountability transparency revolution, so that citizens can see exactly where their taxes go, how we use the resources from our extractive industries and how these are spent. And this would bring about a swift reduction in money laundering, in tax evasion, problematic price transfers in corporation, hidden ownership of assets, and the trade in arms, drugs, and human trafficking. The accountability agenda would also encourage business leaders to integrate sustainability development into their business strategies as core business by conserving land, water, energy, and to eliminate waste to stay cost competitive. Many companies realize that if they are to promote or even protect their brand and their markets of engaged citizens and connected by social media, they need to strengthen their own governance mechanism. In fact, after the Rana Plaza incident in Bangladesh, where 1,100 young women garment workers were forced to work in very unsafe conditions and eventually were killed when the factory collapsed, have created a huge outrage of citizens and have indeed forced many corporations to be more accountable for their supply chain, to clean up their value chain by promoting safer working conditions, labor rights, and taking responsibility for those who have died and for the families affected. So in conclusion, I have only one message. Without sound institutions and open governance, there can be no chance of sustainable inclusive development. With open and good governance as a fundamental core in the post-2015 development agenda, we can rebuild the trust that is needed to forge a new global partnership to realize the future we want, a future of sustainable and shared prosperity and well-being for our people. At the end of the day, transparency and accountability matters because it makes sure that we have a people-centered, planet-sensitive development for the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Nurin. I think this is very convincing, very thorough elaboration of why transparency, accountability, participation matter in the post-2015 development agenda. Again, I would like to welcome all of you who just join us in this afternoon session. Following that, Nurin, I would like to invite Iftikhar to make case. Iftikhar is from Bangladesh. He leads the Transparency International in Bangladesh, and I believe you have stories to tell, you have ideas, so you have 10 to 15 minutes to tell us your story, please.
I don't know.
Yes,
maybe.
Yes, it should be there. Your presentation should be now. This one. You can
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm sure it will be very, very difficult to follow from Nurin has left us exactly presentation, and most of the things that many of us would like to speak have been told. But I was asked to speak about what have been achieved in terms of good governance in the Asia Pacific region and what could be done. So I thought I would share in two parts, make 4 or 5 comments on what have been achieved as I look at it in the region. I will not talk much about Bangladesh, at least in the main presentation. Maybe you can come back to this specific to Bangladesh in the discussion. And secondly, I'd also talk a little bit, maybe 4 or 5 points about what could be done. Now, in the inaugural session today, we had the Honorable President of Indonesia telling us it was an excellent speech. It was really inspired, like most of us, I guess. He said that only 10 countries of Asia Pacific region are now qualified to be OGP. I would like to echo his view, only that I'm an optimist. If you fight corruption and if you want governance in your respective countries, you have to be optimist. Otherwise, especially in countries like Bangladesh and other developing countries, otherwise you won't survive actually. So I'm an optimist. So I would like to say the same thing. Like the Honorable President, I don't have to be speaking like the President, but I would say that as many as 10 countries are qualified in the Asia Pacific region. So that's the approach I would like to take. And so in terms of what has been achieved, I think if you take the first point I want to make is if you look around the region, of course, let me also preface by saying that we are talking of a region which has some of the best governed countries of the world, the best examples, and also on the other hand, some of the worst examples of governance deficit and spirit of corruption. If you take, for example, the CPI, Corruption Perception Index, which is released every year by TI, that shows the best performing countries are in the region. Some of the top countries like New Zealand, Singapore, Hong Kong, Australia. But also on the other hand, we have the worst performing countries in the region, including my own. So it's a diverse region, but nevertheless, if you take a kind of overall view, we see that governance and anti-corruption has become now, in a sense, occupy a key space in the core public discourse. And if you look at the macro level, you see that in almost every country's governance is reflected in the annual development plans, perspective plan, 5-year plans, and so on. In political parties' manifesto, you see almost in every country's governance and anti-corruption feature prominently. In fact, new political forces that are emerging on the basis of anti-corruption manifesto. In terms of elections, the key components of agenda of election manifesto, we see governance and anti-corruption. In terms of policies and legal reforms, we see a lot of things are happening. We have Right to Information Act recently enacted in at least 16 countries by our count. Anti-Corruption Act in many countries. We have Money Laundering Act, Anti-Money Laundering Act enacted in a large number of countries. A few countries already have Whistleblower Protection Act. We have elaborate procurement laws and rules across the region. A number of countries have adopted their national integrity strategy or a national anti-corruption plan, as in the case of Indonesia, we have that. In terms of institutional changes, I think we see new institutions emerging or existing institution reform. Anti-corruption commissions have been set up in specialized anti-corruption agencies in at least 26 countries. A number of countries have separate institutions called the ombudsman. We have the Information Commission, we have anti-money laundering units strengthened in many countries. 15 countries of the region now qualify in the Egmont group that we know in terms of capacity to prevent money laundering or control money laundering. A number of countries, in fact all the countries, almost all the countries of the region have ratified the UN Convention Against Corruption, which is a very significant step in our understanding. Many of them have adopted implementation plans. A lot of them have undergone the implementation review. As a result of application of some of the provisions of the UNCAC, UN Convention Against Corruption, repetition of assets, stolen assets are taking place, including my own country. I've recently succeeded in one case at least. All the countries of the region are part of the ADB OECD initiative. There are regional other international forums and platforms in which Asian countries are partners, like Commonwealth, of course, ASEAN, SAARC, etc. They have also their specific, in relative degree of importance, anti-corruption governance as part of the agenda of those initiatives. Moving on, in terms of civic engagement, which is at the core of this conference and the Open Government Partnership, I think, and I speak from my own experience in my own country and the region, I think voice and accountability is very much prominent, and in many ways we see that work. There's a greater awareness against corruption, greater awareness of the importance of governance, of promoting governance. In specific sectors in many countries in the region, and particularly service delivery sectors like education, public service delivery sectors like education, health, local government, of which we have been talking since morning, have been making significant improvements as a result of not only governance institutional capacity improvement, but also in terms of application of social accountability tools. A whole series of social accountability tools are being applied in a number of countries of the region in specific sectors like education, health, and local government, and so on, in land administration, in climate finance, and so on. Some of the tools that we apply in those countries are these initiatives are citizen scorecards, open budget tracking, social audit, integrity pacts or pledges, and so on. At least 10 countries of the region have introduced what TI calls ELA, Advocacy Legal Assistance Centers, which are producing good results in terms of promoting governance and the corruption at the service delivery levels. In one of the recent studies conducted by TI has shown, that's a study conducted on 53 countries, that MDG have been better achieved by in situations where participatory governance and social tools have been effectively used. Which tells us that if we could have higher levels of governance and integrity, we could have better performance in terms of achieving MDGs. And in fact, many of the countries where it has so achieved, I think a lot of credit goes to the application of social accountability tools, which is essentially goes at the core of civic engagement or participation of the people, trying to bridge the gap between service provider and service recipients by application of those tools. So coming to very quickly what could be done, I think what I have said so far.
Let me open.
What could be done? What I have said so far is basically like hardwares. We have the hardwares in place. The main problem is the software, the practice. We have laws. I said we have institutions, we have policies, but the big difference is being made by the lack of enforcement, lack of application, and lack of the capacity to really enforce, implement the policies and strategies that have been adopted. Effective institutions of accountability and national identity system would be the key, which is the core problem that we see across the region. Particularly law enforcement agencies, accountability institutions like the judicial system, police, law enforcement, other law enforcement bodies, administration, they are, or the anti-corruption commission that I mentioned, human rights commissions or information commissions. They are in place, but in terms of their effectiveness, either they are lacking in professional capacity, leadership, or more importantly, in many countries like our own, the tendency to manipulate or control those institutions by partisan political motivations. So, in most cases, we see that accountability institutions are used to promote not in the national agenda or public interest, as it is used. These are used for promoting partisan political agenda. So, for which we need a stronger, could have done better if our voices were stronger, the civil society and citizen participation were stronger, which is at the core of the problem that we have, many of us face in these countries, which is as we see, increasing shrinkage or gradual shrinkage of the space for civil society to operate, including my own country, where some of the civil rights are severely under challenge. And being critical means that you belong to the enemy camp. So the traditional Bush doctrine, either you are with us or with our enemies, that is manifested quite tragically, I would say, in many cases, because we are making one step forward, but we go a few steps backward as a result of the lack of capacity of the political authority to understand criticism as being a source of strength, and critics are viewed as enemies. We can come back to this in the course of the discussion. I personally think that we could have done far better in terms of governance and particularly in control of corruption. We had, as Nolan has very rightly mentioned, had more effectiveness in international governance, or more better international governance. If you look at, for example, some of the countries that we are represented here, in my own country, at least in all high-profile cases of corruption, you will see the involvement of companies or corporate bodies representing countries where corruption is perceived to be lowest. That's a reality, and I think there's a need for demand-side control of corruption also. And not much, we don't talk much about this, and it's very important for us to remember. And of course, as you have mentioned, moderator, at the beginning, we are one of those, the Transparency International. We have been trying to advocate for governance and anti-corruption as a standalone agenda, not only for the macro thing, but also in terms of delivery, in terms of at the micro level, because as we've seen in the MDG phase, better governance has ensured better delivery across the MDG. So I think that if we can have governance as a standalone objective, it will be more effective in terms of delivery of sustainable development that we are looking at the post-2015. Finally, I would say that both the angel and the devil lie in politics. So if we have the political will properly having the software, we'll have everything under the sun properly delivered. But in the absence of that, which is the reality, or in the deficit of that, which is the reality, we have the devil around us, which is we need to fight off together. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Iftikhar. I think the list that you put there, what could be done, I think these are calls for us, and then we can explore better, of course, and explore more in the discussion. But for now, I would like to invite Beate, as someone who is dealing with the development, not only agenda, but development practices, development policy, as the country director of the OGP in Indonesia. Perhaps you have some perspective, some ideas, some insights that you could share for us here, especially when we look at these open government principles and then link it to the development. And I agree that in many countries, if not all, we have development planning agency. We have development plan at place at the national level down to the local level. But then how we undertake this, how we carry out development. So I invite you to share your insights and perspectives. 10 to 15 minutes, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Pak Yanwar, and very good to be here with you. Thank you for having me on this distinguished panel. As Iftikhar was saying, Nolene is a bit of a hard act to follow because she, I think, has made a lot of the sort of at least conceptual points that I was going to make. But I mean, you had asked me, the question that you had put towards me in preparing for this was basically how to integrate good governance and public participation into the development agenda. And so in trying to answer that question, what I thought I could do is basically very briefly look at, why is it important, good governance in sort of advancing development, and Nolene has made that case very strongly. But then also what type of tools are already available and are being used or are being sort of, piloted in terms of, making development, planning, implementation, execution and monitoring more participatory and therefore more as a tool to making development more sustainable and more equitable. And the other part of my intervention, I thought, it would be good to look a little bit at, how this public demand for participation is actually changing the entire process for the post-2015 development agenda. Because if you compare it with the MDGs, I think we see a very marked difference, both in terms of the process, but also the content, and that's something that is very interesting to see. Now, let me see whether I can do all of this in 15 minutes. Now, of course, the case for good governance as a critical requirement for development is being understood. Increasingly, Nolene has made the case. We know that from experience around the world that countries with well-performing and efficient and accountable institutions perform better in terms of generating growth and ensuring that this progress benefits all segments of society. So there's a close correlation, if you like, between the level of development of a society and the extent to which public decision-making processes adhere to good governance principles and institutions perform their mandates in an accountable and transparent manner. The 2000 UNDP development report actually provides UNDP Human Development Reports provides in fact a good background and evidence to support these statements. The report, for example, emphasized the need for deepening democracy as an essential ingredient to development. In 2010, we conducted a study as UNDP, the path to achieving the MDGs, which also provides a good synthesis of global experience and how good governance has supported development. There is another reason why I'm actually mentioning human development explicitly, because it helps us to understand what we mean by development and why governance is so important for development. Of course, as we all know, since the 1990s, we've moved largely away from just defining development as economic progress and have started defining it more as enriching human lives. And that approach that UNDP uses rests on the belief that development occurs when people not only have an opportunity to live long and healthy lives and have a decent standard of living, but also when they are able to participate in the type of decisions that affect their lives. So that's where the governance perspective comes in, and that is why governance is so crucial for development. Governance, if you like, is what determines how the wealth of a nation is shared, how much is captured by elites, and whether there is room for people to influence the development path of their country. Of course, if we look at sort of growth and development trends over the past decades, there's of course enormous economic progress. And we also know that the world globally and a majority of countries are set to achieve the MDGs by 2015. But in parallel, there has been, and that is a very worrying factor, an explosion, if you like, of inequality. The development picture, and Nolini was speaking to this, is uneven. We see wide disparities that persists, and a number of countries and regions that are falling behind on some of the MDGs. So this, to me, is actually the challenge of the 21st century, and it is at the heart of it a governance challenge, because the only way to tackle these things, these issues of sustainability and equity and creating greater inclusiveness and opportunities for broader cross-section of society and a more sustainable development, the only way to do that is through substantive improvements in the quality of governance. Now, well-targeted programs that are designed consultatively, we know that from experience, well-targeted development programs, if you just take the practitioner perspective, that are designed consultatively and run effectively and transparent. Sorry. Slow down. It's the 15 minutes. Yeah. So well-targeted programs that are designed consultatively, transparently, and run efficiently are key to achieving this desired impact and accelerating progress across the MDGs. Civil society participation is a critical element, obviously, in this, and civil society can not only help in ensuring evidence-based planning, but also overseeing, obviously, the performance of public institutions and how well public resources are being spent. The potential of information and communication technologies to support development efforts is also crucial. And in fact, the first Human Development Report launched after the 2000 Millennium Summit focused on the role of ICT, of technologies in the development effort. Government's ability to execute and deliver on its roles and functions has certainly been changed for good by the emergence of the internet, social media, and other dimensions of the digital revolution. And people are now, of course, also able to participate more easily in public decision-making processes and influence government and be partners in a more open government through these new information technologies and social media. And I think His Excellency the President has given us a few very good examples how that works in Indonesia. Now, outside ICT, countries are also using different tools to ensure evidence-based and targeted planning, as well as performance monitoring of their public institutions. In Indonesia, for example, a number of provinces with UNDP support have started applying minimum service standards to enhance the quality of their public services delivered to citizens. Indonesia's planning agency, Bappenas, also uses a very broad bottom-up approach, consultation approach. It's called the Musrembang in Indonesia, involving all of the country's districts to validate its annual development plan and to prioritize programs for public investments. And to integrate democratic principles into its planning and policy-making processes, Indonesia has even gone a step further. With UNDP support, Indonesia has developed the so-called Indonesia Democracy Index. And that index measures democracy across three key dimensions, namely civil liberties, political rights, and the quality of the institutions of democracy. And it provides this index recommendations for government policies and programs to address democratic deficits, both at national and provincial level. And a number of provincial and the national government in Indonesia have actually started using the findings of this index as a basis for their own policy making and planning. So I think these examples are all good examples of innovations in governance and how to achieve better development results. Now, let me now turn to the post-2015 agenda and spend a few moments on that. We've seen from the global consultations on the new development agenda facilitated by the UN in 2013, late 2012-2013, involving 83 countries and 200,000 citizens, that the one thing that people clearly are asking for is an expanded development agenda that includes strengthened public accountability, equity, and human rights. That is something that has come across all the different consultations. And that strong public demand, I think, has led, as I was saying at the beginning, both to changes in the process, how now the post-2015 development agenda is being constructed, as well as in the content and the likely composition of the goals and indicators. On the process, as you know, the MDGs were basically formulated by a small number of people, of experts, as a roadmap for the implementation of the Millennium Declarations. To basically just translate the key principles of the Millennium Declarations into goals and targets, and using some of the indicative goals that we had from the international development conferences of the 1990s. Now, unlike the formulation of the MDGs, the process leading to the preparation of the post-2015 goals and targets is a global, broad-based consultative process. And this process has involved both citizens and policymakers around the world, involving a multitude of different channels, ranging from the high-level panel of eminent persons, which President Susilo Bambang Yudhoyono co-chaired as one of the three chairs, advising the USG on the post-2015 development agenda. We also have the country consultations, we have the open group working processes, and we have the My World survey, which leveraged the power of ICT, again, to capture the views of ordinary citizens around the globe. And I think I should note that we've managed to, the My World survey, gather the voices of 2 million people worldwide on what they believe should be the priorities for the development agenda post-2015. And not surprisingly, the third priority that they've given is open and honest government, after education, which came in first, and healthcare, which came in second. So it's a huge priority for people. On the content, the MDGs, as we were saying before, did not include a specific goal on democratic governance. The assumption was, in fact, that the good governance principles enshrined in the Millennium Declaration would take care, in one way or another, of the governance dimension of the MDG agenda. But I think the midterm review of the MDGs in 2010 pointed out that the lack of a more explicit iteration of good governance as a goal, in fact, may have contributed to underperformance and uneven performance on some of the goals. So the review, the 2010 review, therefore recommended to move towards a more integrated approach that includes governance to reduce poverty and achieve the MDGs. So I think what we are seeing is basically that the post-2015 agenda and the SDGs are likely to change, that the high-level panel report has in fact highlighted the importance of explicitly incorporating good governance principles into the new agenda, noting the expectation of people the world over for their governments to be honest, accountable and responsive to their need. The report called for a fundamental shift to recognize peace and governance as core elements of well-being, not just additional extras. And with regards to the idea of open government, the high-level panel report went on to stress the need for responsive and legitimate institutions that encourage the rule of law, property rights, freedom of speech, and the media, open political choice, access to justice, accountable and public institutions. And all these principles are, of course, core principles of the OPG process also. So what is required to the high-level panel report is, and Nulin, you point that, and the high-level report uses the same expression, is a transparency revolution supported by accountable and responsive governments. So I think as UNDP, we believe that this is a sensible approach, and there is a clear need not to treat governance as a cross-cutting seam only, across thematic areas such as environment, climate change, poverty reduction, but to also have it as a standalone goal, signaling the importance of good governance for development. And maybe just before closing, a sort of piece of news item that I had this morning from Minister Amida of Bappenas, who has agreed to have Indonesia as a pilot country for a global UNDP initiative designed to develop and test illustrative governance goals and indicators to feed into the open working group process. So Indonesia will be at the forefront of trying to define this. How will it look like? I mean, it will be a recommendation that goes to the international negotiation processes, but in terms of trying to put our finger on how would a governance goal look like, Indonesia is going to sort of try and test that, and I'd like to congratulate Indonesia in assuming this pioneering role. So, as UNDP, I think we'll remain engaged in this debates and framing the framing of the post-2015 development agenda to make sure that it gives indeed everyone a chance to be part of the process and defines the world the way we want it. And I think today's roundtable discussion is just another contribution to making this happen. So thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you. Thank you, Beata. Thank you. And I just learned from you now that Indonesia has agreed to pilot the illustrative goals on governance. So I think this is good news, especially not only for us, government, but also for our colleagues from civil society, who has been tirelessly advocating the inclusion of governance, as Iftikhar mentioned, in the post-2015 development agenda. Speaking of which, I think it's the time for Sugeng Baggio is the Executive Director of INFID, Indonesia NGO Forum, Indonesian NGO Forum for Indonesian Development, and also he's also the executive member of the Beyond 2015. Sugeng is very active in the, to say the least, to the advocating of transparency, accountability issues in the post-2015 development agenda since the high-level panel, since Indonesia was one of the co-chairs. So, Pak Sugeng, I give you 10 to 15 minutes slot to tell us your perspective, your views, your idea on how and why governance is important in the post-2015 development agenda from the civil society perspective. Thanks. You want to start with this? Okay.
Thank you, Pak Januar. Yeah. I have to confess my bias because I came from NGO, and maybe you don't need to agree 100% with me, because my idea and proposal may be either too much or too few. I have Basically, my presentation is as justification for why government